Hi, this is Ken Jarecke, and today we're talking pictures with Paul Bellinger. Paul's going to ask me some questions on how we put together the last issue of Curious magazine. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Good. How's it going, Ken?
Going well.
Nice. Looking good.
Self-isolating out here, self-distancing. I'm probably about, 40 miles from the nearest city.
Yeah, yeah. We're both pretty socially distant as it is.
Yeah, I think that has to do with my horoscope. It's like evidently it's a good thing for me to be away from people.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Same thing with me. I haven't noticed a major change,
Right.
really. So that tells us like we're pretty distant from society, you know, from the
Yeah.
get-go. So
Two
cool.
two
So
lone wolves, two lone wolves talking together.
yeah, exactly. So let's get into these pictures.
Yeah, what do you
I
want to
wanna
see?
I wanna open up the pictures. I wanna see the final take that
The
you
final
selected from
take?
there. Yeah, the final take, basically the stuff that you culled the magazine from. And I just want to talk about just some general information, like where
So
you
here's
were,
here's the
what you're
final
doing.
here's the final files that went into the magazine.
Nice.
There's you want those?
Scroll through those for a second.
Okay.
Just show them all off here real quick.
Okay, I'm just going to click through here quickly. So this is what we started with, and Um, if you look past, at a couple videos in the past, you'll see how we kind of laid it out and got to this point. And there's a few images, like this image didn't make the magazine.
Pull it up. Pull it up full size.
Oh, well,
Is that
um,
possible?
maybe.
Otherwise, you can keep clicking. So that one didn't make it. Why didn't that one make it in?
I'll just go through. You can see those full
Here we
size
go.
now.
Yeah, for us people with little screens. You talk.
So I'm trying to get to that image. This is the one that didn't make it.
Okay.
So it didn't make it for a couple of reasons. It didn't make it because the theme of the magazine ended up being the images dictated what the theme of the magazine was going to be, and the theme was isolation and love. That's how it came about. This one, there might be some love happening there, but there's not a whole lot of isolation. I love the
Gotcha.
image though.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great image. Might even work as a double truck, but maybe probably not though. The stuff's kind of nice silhouettes right in the middle. Okay, so tell us about the overall goal going into this. Tell like the trip itself. Where were you? What were you doing? Why were you going to Spain and Morocco?
I was just going there for fun, um, and so I wanted to shoot some pictures on the way as well. And it just I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time shooting, but I did want to, the goal was to produce a magazine from this trip, but also just to shoot with one camera and one lens throughout the whole trip.
Okay, yeah. What was the lens?
It was a 55,
Okay,
55
55
1.8.
millimeter.
Yeah.
All right, nice. And so is this a common thing that you do when you go someplace just for fun? You bring a camera and you shoot, you do street photography.
Yeah, I'm always shooting. Um, and sorry, I'm just going to start a
Yeah,
slideshow.
they'd rather see those pictures than our faces, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just let these click through real quickly and they'll lap
Okay.
around. So, what was the question? No, I'm
I
always
was just
shooting. I'm always shooting, and you don't know exactly what direction these images are going to go, what they're going to end up being, as a body of work. And so that was, I started with a very simple goal: make some pictures. That might be a little too fast.
That's cool. Yeah, you can slow it down on the next round.
Okay. So the goal was just to travel light, not get too caught up in making pictures, not working, 12 or 14 hours a day. I would basically go out and take a walk in the morning and maybe a walk in the afternoon, but nothing too drastic.
Nothing too taxing or anything.
Yeah,
Okay, so this is kind of like casual shooting for you. This isn't really like, I mean, you're serious when you're on the street, but you're not all day while you're in Spain and Morocco worrying about the light and thinking about, finding a good neighborhood with colors and things like this.
right,
You didn't plan anything out. You didn't think, "Oh, I'm going to go to this neighborhood or that neighborhood." You just kind of, wherever you happen to be going on your fun trip, you just try to make some pictures along the way here and there.
right. And so
And
you kind of saw. I'm just going to start another slideshow here, and I'm going to do it slower. I'm going to do them for 3 seconds, but um,
okay,
so that was what we ended up with as far as selects for the actual magazine. But this is
okay.
kind of there are well there so this is kind of like what this body of work was pulled from, and these are untoned. These are just raw images. These are just the
hmm
raw files. They're not toned at all. And so go ahead.
Okay, no, go ahead. You tell us what are we the broad. This is the total take from the whole trip.
This is so I shot about 2,000 images, and this is about 600. This is 644 images. So this would be what I would consider um, kind of my selects before you get into a tight, heavy edit.
Gotcha. So this is sort of like these ones pass the smell test. You're cutting it down from full take of 2000 to roughly 25% or something like that, to
Right.
get down to like 600 ish. Yeah.
And
Okay.
so
And so
why I do that is so that when I get a request from a client, I need something, of a person walking on the street in Madrid or whatever it could be. It could be these graffiti artists deface. I need a picture of deface working. I don't have to go back to the the original day with the raw take and look at all the outs. These are basically the ins as far as what I would be
mhm.
okay with somebody seeing. And like I said, these are untoned. These are just the raw images, and they're a lot. In some cases, they're a lot different than what you just saw in the final image files for
Yeah.
publication.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, this is sort of like the set of images that you think are usable for one thing or another. And in this case, you pulled out how many ended up going in the magazine? Like 60?
I think there are 55 in the magazine or 54.
Okay, so 54. So from that 600 roughly, you found a theme that you wanted to pull up and make a magazine from on isolation and love. And you went through and you pulled out about the best 55 images to lay out that magazine. So that doesn't necessarily mean that those images that are going into the magazine are the best images from the entire shoot. Is that right?
No, because you end up with a lot of images that just don't work. They might not work because they won't fit on the page properly. Most of the shots in the magazine are double trucks. So if they won't work as a double truck, then and they won't work as a full page single image, then there's not much place for them to go. I'd have to to have to do like a 3/4 page spread, or 1 3/4 page spread, or 1 1/3 page spread, or something like that, and that just gets you know that's a whole level of brings in other problems, other design problems that I don't I don't I don't want to deal with, basically.
Yeah. Oh, did you see those pictures? There was a couple that were toned in there, just a few clicks back. Let's try to remember to revisit those where you were standing. It looked like above the entrance of like a subway entry or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just starting to see. You'll see there's starting. So this is in Madrid, and this was about 2 weeks ago. So um It's less than 2 weeks ago. So you can start seeing just the beginnings of the coronavirus type of change in behavior on the street, but it's just very limited. There's just there's just hints here and there.
Hmm.
So it's kind of interesting in that regard that um, a week later, the whole city's shut down from when these images were made. And
Yeah,
you
and
can
there's a
see, like,
travel ban, and
yeah, I mean, it's the whole city's. Now this is the fourth most impacted place in the world. Spain country.
yeah, yeah, that's crazy. That's a major change. You're probably one of the last ones to be photographing that before the travel ban.
Right.
So let's talk about your shooting strategy a little bit briefly. You've mentioned it a little bit here and there, and through the editing process, you're talking over while you're editing, and you're kind of, I think the person can get a sense of how you work from that. But just briefly, kind of give us the lowdown on what you try to do when you go out for shoots like this.
Well, you can see in this, like, segment here, I just kind of like that road and that light that was bouncing around there. So the light is what first attracted me, and so then I'm trying to build an image around that light. And so that's number one. And it's street photography. You don't have any control over where people are going to be or who's going to do what. So you got to just kind of work the street and try to figure out the patterns and kind of predict where the image is going to happen. And so that's what I'm always doing. Here I'm working that light right there with that
Hmm.
shadow. So that's all I'm worried about, is that light. And then I'm waiting for something to come together. And then this guy walks over there in this bottom left hand corner by Better Coffee
Yeah,
side. And so he's an anchor that I can build on. So now I have the shadow, the people walking down the street, and I have this guy who's just checking his messages. So he's not going to go anywhere. And then I can work
nice.
that situation and try to build an image.
Those are nice. I love that green light coming from behind.
Yeah, it's just, you find the light first, and then you try to figure out how people are moving in that certain area. And when I build an image, I'm usually trying to shoot for a double truck. That's kind of just my it's ingrained into my thought process. So for me, a double truck it's all one image, but it can be divided into two sides. And so you got a
Something
right
like
and a
that.
left side. And so there's plenty of room in the middle of the image to take care of the gutter, which is the seam in the middle of a magazine. Um, and so a reader can look on the left side, they can look on the right side, and they can get something from both sides of that image. But then when they put them together, hopefully the entire image is greater than the sum of the two sides. And this one, you can see the gap is too wide, and I can't, like, quite figure out. This image here, I don't really have anything on the other side. And this image here, I can't figure out a composition. So I think this
Hmm.
image did end up in the book, but it's a full page. It's not a double page. See, I'm
Hmm.
trying to get somebody. I'm trying to build an
Yeah,
image, but
that was a
sometimes
nice
it
one.
doesn't come together.
Yeah,
Like
sort
these
of like
images
on one
here,
of
this
those.
whole series here, I was trying to work this green light, and I'm trying to work both sides of the image there, and it doesn't quite come together. I've got the statue in the upper right hand quadrant. It didn't really come together. And then I flip it
Hmm.
around, and so now I have the statue on this side, and I was hoping I could do back to back double trucks, but in the end I didn't think the images were strong enough. And this, the
Yeah.
right hand side is very strong, but the left hand side, I'm looking for somebody, and I have this, the person drinking coffee, this guy coming out the door, but I thought it was too crowded. And this image, I've got a strong left side, and so I'm just looking, hoping that something happens on the right side to balance that out.
Okay, so that left side is your anchor in that
Right.
case. Those people sitting there, or the person that was drinking coffee in the previous. And that's what you mean by an anchor. Sometimes it can be the light or like those bikes, and then you're just waiting for someone else to come walking through on the left.
Right.
Or if it's about
The anchor, I
isolation, you
call it
just
an
have the
anchor
bikes.
because it's something that I can build an image around. And the anchor
Something that
normally
isn't
is going to
moving.
stay there. It's going to stay there for, you know, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So
Gotcha.
I can build something off the anchor.
Okay, so you kind of think about first you see the light, you kind of thinking about how to get the light into the picture, and then you're trying to find an anchor, and then you're waiting for some spontaneous action.
Yeah, I mean, unless it just all comes together right in front of you.
So I guess when I say when you're at first thing that you're looking for is the light, and then you're kind of sorting out what your background is. Then that's kind of when you're starting to find the anchor, and if you can find that stationary person or the bikes or whatever it may be, something that's not going to move, then you kind of compose around that and then try to fill the other side of the frame with some spontaneous action.
Yeah, I mean, but it can happen in reverse. I mean, if you find an anchor, something to build an image off in the first place, then you'll try to get the other things to come together as well.
Yeah, so now where are these are Morocco, I take it.
Right. This is the Medina in Tangier, which is kind
How
of the
long were
old
you in
part of the city.
Morocco?
I was there like 4 days.
4 days. Okay, nice. And
I mean,
overall
I
this
was in
whole trip.
Madrid for about 4 days, and I was in Morocco for about 4 days.
Okay, so this is roughly a week of shooting, a couple times a day for roughly like what, an hour or two?
Yeah, I mean, I would just take a walk for an hour or so.
Okay, yeah. What do you think about shooting at night, street photography at night?
I'm fine with, I mean, I'm happy to shoot whenever, and technology allows us to do that now.
It looked like there were a lot of selects there that came from night shooting at night. Do you like the light at night? Do you find that it's better or worse than shooting in the day?
Um, no, not really. I don't really have. I mean, I like shooting at night. I've always shot at night, even in the film era, just because you can't shoot without light. And so the first thing, is always when you're shooting at night is to find that light. Whereas in the
Hmm.
daytime, you kind of always have enough light. It's just not great light or whatever. So shooting at night, it kind of limits you in some ways, but it also focuses grabs your attention and where you need to go.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I really find that always to be the case. Sometimes when you have a limitation like that, it helps, especially in some places like Morocco where everything seems interesting. In the daytime, you can get a little overwhelmed with everything is possible to shoot. At night, it kind of forces you to people huddle around the light too,
Right.
at
Yeah.
night in these kind of places. So makes it a little bit easier, I think, to find great pictures. I always seem that my keeper rate is a little higher at night. I always seem to like it better, but
It forces you also to get really good with your technique. You can't just snap away at night. You have to really kind of um, pay attention to your body position, your shutter speed, your how you release the shutter, all those type of things.
absolutely. Yeah. It's much more limiting on that side. Yeah, that's a good point. In the daytime, I can just like crank up the shutter speed and be at like F12, F11, F12, F11. And, you don't have to even worry about focusing too much, when there's plenty of light. I mean, you got infinite depth of field and makes things a lot easier. At night, you have to make choices. You got to have shallow depth of field.
So you can see, as you're looking through this, just you can see how sometimes you just find yourself in at a place where things are happening and you work it, and it doesn't always result in an image, but you
Hmm.
can see there's potential there at least. And so that's what that's what causes you to stop and point your camera in that direction in the first place.
Yeah, and then so I mean, I find that as well that there's certain areas where I'll be walking around and I'll be like, man, this would make a beautiful image, but there's really no one around here. No one's gonna come walking in this scene unless I want to wait here for a serious amount of time. And so that's usually when I'll shoot like the pictures of some of those in the alleyway where I'll just take a picture of it anyway and just imagine later what it would have been like if some people had walked through.
Yeah, I mean, it's still it's almost like you're taking visual notes at that point.
Totally. Exactly. And you always kind of make a mental note of maybe I'll go back, but unless you're in a place for a long enough time, it's hard to re-frequent the same spots.
Right. I mean, especially on something like this, when you're not going to go back to that spot again, you're just going to be there for whatever 10 or 15 minutes. It's you get one chance to work the scene.
Yeah. Now that's really amazing. I mean, to get this many keepers out of such a short amount of shooting, that's very impressive. And to do it so casually with one lens and everything. What is your feedback now that you spent a week shooting with the 55 millimeter? What's your feedback on that lens and street photography?
I think it's a great lens. I love that perspective. I think it forces you a little bit to really you can see I don't really crop. I want to fill the frame, and so it forces you to think through all that where with a 20 or 28 or even a 35 you're just you can get a little more sloppy, and that's kind of a you see that commonly in street photography where they're kind of photographers get in the habit of just shooting things wide and then expect the viewer to see
That's
what they
right.
were trying to say in that whole mess. And with a 55 you have to be very conscious of exactly why the image works and why it's important and
That's
what you're
nice.
trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Yeah,
So
you
this is the
crush it with
thing
the
with the
55.
horse. The thing with the horse, I tried to work it, and I just couldn't figure it out. I mean, it works as an image, but it doesn't. I don't know how you'd get that on.
It's funny. I really liked the very first image I saw
Usually, it's the first.
where
See,
the horse just
you
like
can see I'm struggling because the first image, that's immediately what you see. That's the image, and then you start thinking, hold it, this won't work for the page, or this won't work, uh, because of this or that, and then and then all of a sudden after all that you've got like 10 selects and the first one's still the best, but the 9 ones after that don't accomplish what you were trying to fix in the first place. I mean,
totally. I love that. I think it's such a funny uh it's just like it's such a funny commentary just sort of on how our best efforts often end up ruining the situation. That we get in there, we something catches our eye like that horse, and it's weird, you can't see the whole horse, there's these geometric shapes and this beautiful light, and it catches your eye for a reason because that it's great looking. I love this at night. This is why I love shooting at night. I love those kind of contrasts and colors and things. But getting back to that horse, but then you think, oh, your mind starts working and you think you can make it better. Let me make it better. And you just, I mean, it's like the curse of the human is just to make everything worse, you know? So you start thinking about it too much and you just end up coming away with nothing, wasting time when you had it right from the beginning.
yeah, and maybe that's a situation where if I would have been working like I normally do, when you have a 35 on one camera and a 55 on the other camera, that was probably an image that would have worked with the 35. And so that would have been the natural thing, just to reach for that other camera at that point. instead of trying to keep
Exactly.
working it with the 55.
And of course, I mean, I do think there's something to be said for lingering around. It's sort of like when you can smell a picture in the area, there's a good, I don't think you should just take that first picture and just run
So
away.
this is a good example. This whole sequence here, it's like I don't know that I ever quite got it. But the anchor in this image is that billboard in the distance. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
build everything around that billboard in the distance with the ad. And I kind of got away for it for a sec, but we'll come back to that alley or that road. It's not an alley. This is kind of an alley, but when I come back to that road, I'm still going to be trying to work that billboard into the image and using that as an anchor. And this sequence here, it's like all the elements were there, but I couldn't I couldn't pull this scene together. It just didn't come together. Whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, it
I mean, there's
almost
some
comes
good ones in
together
there.
right here, but it's not, there's
That
not a
was
complete
nice.
image.
Yeah. I don't know. There's some good ones in there. Maybe there's a one-off image. It might not work as in the magazine, but um man, a lot of those pictures I saw there were better than a lot of stuff I see. So almost all the pictures I've been seeing in this are like above a certain standard.
And so these are pretty hot, these files, but that's where they should be exposed. And then once you bring them into Adobe Camera Raw, they're going to tone up real nice. But they look pretty hot when you okay. So I'm back to the billboard, just
Okay.
trying to piece
Yeah.
something together. And I kind of blew
Now,
it. The street vendor there, he was my other side of that image, and you can see I can't quite get, he keeps disappearing on me. The cat kind of made it almost, but the street vendor, which was the other side of that picture, it's just not coming together.
oh, that guy with the purple shirt, that was kind of a nice one when he was on the right and kind of close. There's some in there that are good. I mean, and this is the kind of thing of like, in my case at least, I would look back and I'm sure you can find gems throughout all of these little things that catch your eye now that like that was a nice one with the blue car.
So yeah, this the blue taxi worked. It was very helpful. Especially, it's just like a nice turquoise, and then that the red Gelabib, you know, offsets that.
So so you talked before about recognizing patterns and trying to predict where the people are going to be. And I can see that you do uh, linger in areas where the people are going to be funneled sort of right to like right outside of the top of a subway, a set of stairs, people going to and from subway, busy corners like that. Is that part of your thinking, your strategy?
Yeah, I kind of, oftentimes I'll look for these natural shoots where the people are forced to come through a tight area, or there's some type of it can't, sometimes it's not even a physical thing, it's just people out of their patterns. They walk a certain path and they're used to walking that path, and so I look for those natural areas.
Yeah, I can tell. You can definitely tell that sometimes you kind of post up in a spot where you can tell people are going to just be coming at you. When you're shooting street photography, do you like to have people facing your camera, or do you have anything? I mean, do you prefer? Do you try to avoid people when they're walking away from the camera, like back of heads and things like that, or what's your take on that?
I kind of think the back of the head shot. There's two or three like classic street photos out there that are the back of the head. Um, Lee Friedlander has one that's, everybody kind of tries to copy, and I think it's I think it's kind of I think it's a cop out. I think it's, I mean, these, I'm very kind of I want to like dive in the pool. I don't want to like just like dip my toe in. And so when you're shooting the back of people's heads a lot. It's kind of a tip off that you're not fully committed to the street photography scene.
That's an awesome tip right there. I think that's a perfect. I mean, that's a very practical piece of advice that someone can look at their own images, scroll through your own Instagram feed, and if you see a lot of the back of people's heads, then you got a problem. You know, it's one thing. Like for me and Mike, I personally like to have one person in the frame, like looking towards the camera, or at least be able to see a face. I don't mind if there's like a guy in the background with his head turned or something, but I don't like for the main subject to be facing away from the camera.
No, and this is a shoot here. This is like the perfect example of a shoot. But I've got an image on both sides, and now I'm just waiting for the person to come through, and hopefully both sides are working as the person comes through.
Exactly. That's nice.
And you can see that, oh, that was a scene worth working.
Yeah. What is that, like a little market?
Yeah, this is a flea market. It happens used to happen every Sunday in Madrid. Now, who knows? But
Nice.
and so then you
Is
have
that
these.
something that you'll look for? Do you look for like events and things going on, farmers markets if you were in the US?
No, not necessarily. I mean, wherever I can find people. And so, yeah, naturally, a flea market is easy pickings as far as that's concerned, because there's there are tens of thousands of people on the street.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. In a place like Boise, Idaho, it can be difficult to do street photography unless there's something going on downtown that's going to bring out a lot of people, like a farmer's market or a concert or something.
Yeah, I mean, but even big cities, LA is really hard to do street photography. Nobody walks in LA. I mean, the song is right.
Hmm.
People just don't walk.
So,
They walk from
so I
like
mean,
to the parking lot, and that's about it.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Look at the calendar and see, if there's a farmer's market every Saturday in your hometown, if it's a small town, that's a good thing to hit up. And I personally, when I go to shoot something like that, I don't like to shoot like right in the center of the farmer's market as much. I like to kind of shoot on the periphery a little bit. Just use that foot traffic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like this is they're packing up to go. So this isn't you know the
I
the
love that.
the busy time of the flea market, right? They're packing up, people are leaving, but that's what made the best images, because there is this kind of transition happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can see that you really like to use dividers in the middle of the frame. I really like that too. I find that a place like Morocco, or like when I go to India, you'll see these really small vendors, and you can basically just use the wall that separates them as kind of your gutter. And then you have two totally different scenes happening on the right and left. And they're just totally, even though they're only maybe 10 feet from each other, it seems like they're just completely ambivalent about what the other person is doing.
Well, as photographers, we're always working with a frame. We have this frame. And so what you're doing, like this is a perfect example right here, you have frames inside of that frame. And so when I'm looking at they're taking apart, the booths, and you have these rectangles everywhere. You have that mirror there. I'm trying to work those windows inside the window,
Yeah. The
which
frame inside the frame.
yeah. And so you might, I'm trying to put an element in each one of those quadrants while I'm still keeping that basic double truck structure. And
Hmm.
maybe that's too literal. Maybe that's not freeing enough. I don't know. I mean, it's not. I don't. I don't think. I don't think somebody like Gil Perez is that concerned with, following these self given rules that I follow, but everybody's different.
But I mean, in your case, I mean, I think one thing that you talked with Frank Fournier about was just the being yourself, finding your own vision. And I think over time, obviously, as a magazine photographer, you get paid for double trucks, and that's kind of like the prize that you're shooting for. And I mean, they're the most impactful as a photographer to get one image across two full pages. That's how we all want our work to be seen in the largest possible format. So there's a real strong incentive for you as a working photojournalist over so much time to make that just your second nature. Your instinct is to just look for double trucks. I find it very difficult. Anytime I've tried to think about, I mean, I make double trucks on accident most of the time. And, when I try to think about it, I mean, I try to shoot them as much as I can, but it's difficult. And what's your best advice on that, on shooting? I know you have a really good tip uh, that's gone around the block a few times and managed to work its way down to my level. So what's your tip on shooting double trucks?
I don't I don't remember what is my tip.
You
I
got
mean,
the one tip.
I don't remember. I mean, maybe I came up with something brilliant at one point. Now I've forgotten. But so as far as that's where kind of outside of a cover, the biggest splash you can make in a magazine is a double truck. And it's also, when you're working. So say the day rate was $500. The page rate might be $500. Well, you make a double truck, and all of a sudden you've doubled your money for that assignment. You've got $1,000 instead of $500. So to shoot for a double truck, it made artistic sense for me, but it also made financial sense. And that was kind of what I was known for. Just to, and it worked against me
Totally.
when it came to covers, because I mean, out of I can point to Time magazine covers that were actually shot as double trucks, and they cropped them to make a cover.
Yeah.
I never turned the
Which
camera
is,
vertical.
and that's what you did in your Curious magazine here as well. You basically never shoot horizontals unless it's a specific reason or just
No, I
something
never
very
shoot verticals.
vertical. Yeah. Almost never. But you do when you're doing portraits and other work, or if you're shooting architecture or something, like
Sure.
there's something very vertical, you know. But I mean, even when you shoot sports and things, like you rarely shoot verticals. So yeah, man. Yeah, your cover game is weak, man. You never shoot. I guess
No,
that's the beauty of.
I've got very few covers to speak of. I've got a lot of double trucks, not too many covers.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. No, the tip on shooting double trucks, you mentioned it in the video. It's just, thinking of it as two vertical images, two
Oh
separate
yeah.
images.
I don't know if that's a good tip. I mean, it's how I approach it. Um, and all this is just, it's very kind of subjective, and it's completely personal. All these tips and everything. I don't know that it would work for somebody else, but to create an image with, a horizontal image with two sides, and
Hmm.
one side works and the other side works, and you put them together and they work even better. That's kind of um, my philosophy when I go out and shoot anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the tip. That was the tip I got on shooting the double trucks. It's way easier said than done. I mean, I can tell you, even being able to pose people and move them around, it's hard to shoot double trucks. Thinking of that gutter always seems to mess pictures up for me. So, okay, so getting back to a little bit on your strategy, you mentioned before you don't like to just dip your toe in the water. I mean, I think you're kind of referring to this idea of like when you come onto a scene, you're not trying to be unseen. You're not trying to be invisible. You're announcing your presence with a splash?
Well, so I don't really announce my presence, but I don't try to hide my presence. I I I usually camp out. I usually park myself, and you can see people uh, when you're going in and you're editing. You can see people, 50 feet away that are looking at me and saying, what's that guy doing? Um, and
I
that's
like those
fine.
images.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this ever came together, but I tried.
There's some
Um,
real interesting light there, though.
yeah, I mean, I tried. I mean, this probably would have been another situation where it would have been better with a 35, and trying to make it with a 55
Oh,
just
that's nice.
didn't quite work. It just,
There's all kinds of nice ones in there. Maybe they're nice, but they're not up to that Jarecke level,
well,
upper echelon level.
this is the thing, you're like, you've got a very, very narrow window there where you still have the ambient light coming in. And I was meeting somebody for dinner, and I'm like, okay, I got to work this scene. And it's a bad sign, like when, there's probably like 25 selects from that one spot I was sitting. Whenever you have like 25 selects and you don't have like 4 or 5, it's probably because
Yeah.
you missed it. It's usually a bad sign.
That's so true. That's so true. This is another very counterintuitive tip. I mean, that it's kind of like the idea before with the horse thing of getting in the way of the shot, making it worse. The same thing happens if you find that you shot so many shots of the same and then you can't pick which one's best. It's a sign that none of them are that great. That there
Yeah.
needs to be one that stands out to you, or a handful. Um, but you shouldn't. Yeah, if you have 10 or 15 selects all from the one, that's a struggle. That's like you're hoping that one of them is going to be good. And I do that all the time. I would go back and look at those 15 images that you selected there, and in a few weeks, and probably fall in love with one. Make myself fall in love with one of them. You know,
Well, there's also
Force
this,
myself to choose.
yeah, I mean, but then, so your tendency in those situations is to, I mean, it's everybody's tendency at some point just to spray and pray. When you
Yeah,
get there and you're like, oh, I don't, it's not quite coming together, so you just shoot, 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 and it doesn't help. So, just, I mean, I basically shoot on, one frame at a time, single frame. I have I have the camera set to continuous frames at a slow rate, just in case I'm shooting like with a really slow shutter speed. I'll kind of use that for a crutch. But just to hold down the shutter and hope something comes together, um, that doesn't work either. You really
no.
gotta pick that moment.
Oh, that would be just absolutely agonizing to go through those pictures doing that in street photography.
Could you
You
imagine
know,
what a nightmare that would
oh,
be?
it would be such a nightmare. Yeah, yeah. That's one thing that I really like about street photography in general is that I don't. I definitely shoot way less when I'm shooting street photography than I do in almost any of the other types of photography that I do. And it's one of the things I love about it the most because it's much less of a burden to go through everything, and at the same time it helps you to focus on getting it in as few of shots as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can't shoot it, you know, at the speed you can hand crank a Leica, like Cartier-Bresson or somebody, I mean, then you can't shoot it.
Hmm. Yeah,
And this
yeah.
camera I was using, I gotta say, I always feel like I'm a little rusty with it.
Hmm.
And that's not really what's happening. I don't know if there's a lag in the electronic viewfinder, and a lag in the shutter release button, or a little bit of a lag in both, but
Yeah,
it's not the same as shooting a Leica, or even, you know a high end Canon or Nikon. That shutter release it's just it's just enough off to be frustrating.
that's for sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure exactly with your viewfinder. It might be something. There is a setting where you can increase the frames per second of your viewfinder. That might help a little bit, but more it's this, just the shutter doesn't feel snappy. I noticed that on some of my older Sonys, I felt like they were very clunky, and the newer ones I feel are pretty snappy. That newest A7 that I got is very snappy. But yeah, that's one thing of working with digital that's kind of annoying, I would think.
Yeah, I'm not
I
saying it's
think
like
it,
a huge
y-
problem. It's just it always it makes me feel a little less comfortable when you're really, when you're really shooting one frame at a time and trying, like if you look at these frames, you got the foot, you got that silhouette happening. Um,
yeah,
because the difference between having the proper silhouette and not is, just a just a
totally,
millisecond.
absolutely. So getting to more about how you're actually shooting, um, one trend I see these days in street photography is to use the screen on the back of the camera
Yeah,
and hold your camera out away from your body.
yeah.
What's your take on that? I mean, how often do you use that screen on the back?
I never use it. I even actually have, how it would automatically switch between the monitor and the viewfinder. I just have it on the viewfinder all the time. I don't even let it switch. Um,
Oh,
to
nice.
so to shoot, because I mean, so you got kind of some different. So I was really always an SLR guy. So with an SLR, you're looking through the lens, and for me, I would try to just mentally crawl inside that prism and live within that view, in that rectangle inside the single lens reflex viewfinder. And then if you go to a Leica and you're looking at a rangefinder, you've got that other kind of, it's almost like a different philosophical approach, because you're looking through a piece of glass. Now you're not looking through the lens, and you can keep both your eyes open, and you can see around the frame where you're actually shooting. And so that gives you a lot of advantages too, but it's a completely different approach. So when you're shooting with an SLR, I try to crawl inside and live within that rectangle. When you're shooting with a rangefinder, I kind of just live kind of for that moment that kind of spontaneously happens, and you can see it coming together outside of the viewfinder. And with
Hmm.
electronic viewfinders today, or not so much that, but to shoot with the monitor on the back of your camera, that doesn't fit into any of those two philosophical approaches. It's
Yes.
it's
So
all
when you're saying that,
yeah, go ahead.
well, before you go into that, but when you were talking about you want to crawl inside your viewfinder, what is the benefit of that? What's the reason why that's how you prefer to work?
Well, usually with an SLR, I didn't I mean I didn't do a whole lot of street photography with an SLR. Um, I do more longer lens stuff. And so when you're shooting with a longer lens, and you're shooting manually, manual focus, the difference between, the eyebrow and the eyeball being in focus is like this huge difference. And so
I
to
like that
crawl in
picture.
there and live inside that, if you're shooting sports, if you're shooting, on Capitol Hill, something like that, it makes a lot of sense with an SLR when you're trying to completely fill that frame, but have certain key spots in focus.
I see. That makes sense. That makes sense coming from that background. Um, so when you're on the street, do you have the camera up to your face like for extended periods of time? Or do you just look with your eyes first and then you pull the camera up at the last second for the shots? Or roughly what's the breakdown on that?
It depends, like that, like this scene here, I would just have I'd have the camera, like this scene here, I would be looking through the camera the whole time and waiting for the image to come together.
Hmm.
Um, Other times, when you just spontaneously shooting it, I always kind of carry the camera a couple inches away from my face when I'm walking. And
Yeah,
that's kind of a way to declare my intention. I am here to make pictures. And so if I take your picture, don't be surprised. Right. And so the
yeah,
camera's
yeah,
kind of up here at, kind of like right below your nose level. So you're ready to shoot. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody on the street that you're, there to shoot pictures. And I have the camera strap, a couple loops on my arm. So I'm basically carrying it in my hand and not on my shoulder, that type of thing. Um, but then if
yeah.
I get in a situation where I've kind of found my composition, I found my light, and I'm waiting for something to happen, then I might just stand there with the camera, glued to my eyeball.
Yeah, that's very interesting to think. I mean, I think about it exactly the same. And there's sometimes some strategy of not wanting to have it to your eye because sometimes people won't walk in front of you if you have the camera up to your face. They think you're taking a picture and they don't want to ruin it. Um, because and then on the other hand, there's times where sometimes I'm in a crowd or something and no one cares whatsoever if I'm taking their picture. And it's just, I love to just have it up to my face the whole time. Sometimes you can even almost sort of hide behind the camera, like if someone's in very close quarters, but you never pull the camera down from your face, they really can't say anything to you.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know. I mean, I kind of play it by ear. You can see like those pictures, the famous video film of Gary Winogrand, how he'd always be fumbling with his camera and he's shooting pictures the whole time. But anybody watching
Yeah.
him would think he just didn't know how to use his camera, something like that. That's just another strategy. I just, I never, for whatever reason, I never have any real problems on the street because I'm kind of like I said, I declare my intentions and I'm there to shoot pictures and um you know it's not about you, it's about what comes together in front of me, type of thing. I don't know i don't know if people,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people can, when you're nervous or you think you might be doing something wrong, I know that people can feel that and react to that. At the same time, I think it's just a more honest way to approach the world. Like, I'm here to, I'm here, I'm doing this, and I'm a serious person, and you know, this is. I think people get that you're making, you're working with a purpose in mind. I think.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes it's just unavoidable that someone gets irritated. And some those are sometimes the times when I find it's easier to just kind of like keep the camera up to your face, or like I know you've mentioned other strategies before. It's I think when you become a good street photographer, you have a lot of little tricks and things up your sleeve that you could use if you need to, but there if all goes right, you really don't need any sort of tricks. And I think the number one rule that you always told me is just like don't look like you're sneaking around, don't look sneaky.
Yeah, that philosophy of being sneaky or using an iPhone because people don't know what you're doing, that type of thing, or shooting from the hip. You know, I don't I don't cotton to that.
Absolutely. So you never use the back of your screen. So give me your take on that then. What don't you like about it?
Well, I mean, technically, it's not a good position to work with a camera. It might work for Instagram, but as soon as you put images on paper and you have to like get every pixel, make every pixel count, you'll see that those images are they have movement in them. Or if they don't have movement, then you're shooting at a higher ISO than you should be or need to be because you're using sloppy technique. I mean, when you're creating this this tripod with your both hands on the camera and your elbows tucked in, and then the camera is against your face, that's a secure way to like study the camera. When you have your arm out away from your body and you're pushing the button with one finger and doing this kind of thing where, you know, that's not a secure way to hold the camera. So there's camera movement there. They're not going to normally see that on Instagram, but it's there, and it affects your quality. You know, in photojournalism, if you can't get your body into the position you need to be, you do that, but
Mhm.
it's not a desirable position to be in. And you know, we call it a Hail Mary. Okay, so it's like you're praying that you get the shot that you're hoping to get when you're not looking through the viewfinder. um, and you know, you can use the back monitor in that situation, you know, when you can't like physically get your body there, or when you have to get a higher
Yeah.
angle or a lower angle, yeah, then it makes sense to use the monitor. um, Normally, you know, then when you're doing that, you're using both hands and you're securing the camera, and you're, you know, you're really concentrating. Most of the stuff I see with people shooting with one hand, they're just kind of, it's out of laziness or uh, just not knowing what good technique is. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely like to use it if I'm wanting to shoot from like ground level. Like, I just don't want to lay down on the ground. So,
Yeah,
you know, get
that's
my
a great place
eyeball.
to use it. And you know, you know, like things like shooting a rodeo or a football game, where you might want to have a low angle, but you don't want to lay on the ground. You know,
Yeah.
you don't want to get
Yeah. You don't
stomped
want to
on.
get, don't want to get trampled by
So,
either anything at a rodeo or a football game.
right.
Totally. I mean, I would just to be like a devil's advocate here for all the people that do shoot like that. I would just say, like, maybe, you know, like you said, there's movement. Maybe they get weird angles if they stick their arm out right in front of someone. It's a Hail Mary, like you said, but I think some people's style kind of relies on that happy accident that you get, you know, from movement and blur. Um, like, you're a much bigger stickler for no movement than I am. I'm like fine with camera, you know, camera movement and stuff like that. I mean, if the picture still works, if I still think the picture looks, if it's such a good image that I'm like, look past that, then it's okay. But, you know, if it should be sharp and it's blurry because you're shaking the camera out, holding it out in front of you or whatever, that's just sloppy, you know, and I don't like that. So, I mean, there might be certain times where you might set a goal of, I'm going to go out and shoot sloppy as hell. And if that's your goal, you know, that's your artistic perspective, you know, then that's fine. But I think, like you said, a lot of it is kind of just poor technique and kind of a crutch too, you know, because again, I think there's some, you know, like when people shoot with a Rolleiflex and they're looking down, there's something just a little bit less confrontational when you're looking down at a camera as opposed to looking your subject straight in the face. So again, it can kind of get to that sort of lack of confidence on the street.
Yeah, I mean, if I was shooting on the subway and it's like a public space, but people are in their own private area on this public space, then I could flip up the monitor and start working like that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't
Yeah.
have a problem with doing anything that helps me to make the image that I'm hoping to make. But to just, what I'm saying is to just use that as your standard go-to, to like have the camera out here. Um, Listen, there's billions of pictures taken every day, and there's only so much wall space. There's only so many pages, and there's only so many images once you get past. Say you get your image published somewhere. That's a big accomplishment. Okay, so does it last for more than that publication? Does it get on to a gallery wall after that? Does it get onto a museum wall after that? Does somebody buy that print? There, you know, the the levels of success are so narrow, and there's so much competition that, you know, if somebody's shooting at 3200 ISO when they could be shooting at 800 ISO because they're shooting sloppy and they're using poor technique. That might be the dividing line that keeps you off that gallery wall. And if you're not on the gallery wall, then you don't ever have a chance to be on the museum wall, let alone, somebody's home. Or, it's just, there's, to make a lasting image is so hard to begin with, and the competition is so tough to not do the things you can that are in your capability of doing, like shooting a sharp picture. There's no excuse not to.
Absolutely.
You're just limiting the life of that image.
Yeah, you're limiting the amount of people that would like it, I think, as well.
And if you go back to like the New York school, the new school of photography, and the famous picture of the Empire State Building, with purposeful camera movement. That's a beautiful image. I
Hmm.
would hang that image on my wall. That's there is a place for movement. I shoot with movement all the time. Sports or politics or whatever. It's just there's a place for it, and I don't have a problem of
Absolutely.
breaking those rules when I have a reason to do that.
Totally. That you nailed it right there. If you're doing it for a reason, then I'm all for it. But if you're just everyday technique, standard, then that's just poor technique. So no, that's really good tips. One thing about that we talked about before, and you mentioned it in the video, that you kind of hate to shoot through cafe windows and like photograph the people when they're eating and stuff. What's your take on, elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I don't mind doing it, but I don't want to get up into somebody's grill while they're eating. I mean, shooting through a window, I really don't have a problem with that. I just don't want to. It's kind of a crutch, because you've got that barrier between you and the subject, and
Yeah, they can't walk away.
they're trapped there. And in some ways they're there, to be voyeurs themselves. They're looking out on the street as they're eating dinner, whatever. And so it's fair game in that regard. But there's also times, when people are having, they're on this in this on the side window, like that couple that we saw earlier in this reel. They're having a
Yeah, yeah,
serious conversation. They're not looking for anybody's attention. So I don't want to like totally, you know, be a creeper in that regard, but I still want to like make this image that I, if you can see it, you should be able to photograph it. But that
yeah,
doesn't mean that you have to be, you know, aggressive or creepy about it when you do photograph it.
yeah,
You can get it without like just like, pressing your nose up to the window, I guess.
yeah. I
I don't
mean,
know. It's just
and
one of my little kind of things.
we all have those things, where it's like where we kind of draw an invisible line in the sand and kind of dare ourselves to cross it. And you just had mentioned, I think it was just sort of like stream of consciousness when you were going through the pictures. Yeah, I kind of hate shooting through these cafe windows. So I wanted to get your take on that. And it was just interesting because it came up. I was looking at some old street photography and people were shooting through cafe windows way back. It's part of the canon of street photography. Um, and people have been doing it forever. So I don't see anything wrong with it, but I definitely don't feel super comfortable just lingering around in a window while someone's eating for extended period of time for sure. That's definitely a case where I want to get the picture and get away.
Right. And it's just, I don't actually have a big problem with people that do it either. I'm just, for me, it's just kind of my approach to stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So another subject that you mentioned, kind of in passing, was the difference between street photography and photojournalism, being on assignment. you didn't really give yourself an assignment with this. I mean, the assignment was use one lens and make enough good street photography to fill out a magazine with, about whatever theme you kind of settle on as you go.
Well, that's the thing with, I mean, so photojournalism, there's a narrative. You're assigned to go out and make pictures of, how coronavirus is affecting your community, for example. And so you go
Yeah.
out and do that, and you think of everything you can to illustrate that one story. So the difference is from a photojournalistic standpoint. If you had an editor that said, okay, I want to see a person with a mask, I want to see a person standing in line at the grocery store, I want to see 5 people all standing 6 feet apart, whatever. If an editor is coming up with these uh, just imaginary images that they think might happen, that's a problem as a photojournalist. So you take that in step with being a street photographer. Okay, a street photographer, you don't necessarily have a narrative. You're not going out to, like, I wasn't going to the flea market in in Madrid to photograph people wearing masks or something because of coronavirus. I was just going to find images, and that's the only goal. So where those two ideas intersect is the photojournalist working to tell a story doesn't go out with preconceived ideas, because if they go out with preconceived ideas, they're basically limited to those preconceived ideas that may or may not happen or exist, and they won't see things that are actually happening. So as a street photographer, you still don't have those preconceived ideas, but after you've shot, after you've created a body of work, you can recognize that, oh, when I was in Madrid and Tangier, I can see that I was kind of working on this the images reveal this about how I was working during that time. And so a photojournalist working with a narrative, or a street photographer working without a narrative, eventually, if they're doing their jobs properly, they both have a narrative at the end of the day. It's just a lot less focused and a lot more open to interpretation for the street photographer.
Absolutely, man. Wow, you nailed that one out of the park. Um, you were talking about preconceived ideas, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying about that horse picture. You know, you catch a glimpse of it, it catches your eye, make a nice shot of it, and then if you have these, you try to you ruin it by overthinking it. The same thing happens. Like your mind can't come up with as good of ideas as you can find on the street if you're just have an open mind and you're not looking for only those preconceived ideas.
And that's the problem, that's the problem in photojournalism, but it's also the problem in street photography, because street photographers tend to really self-edit them before they even, I mean, you'll have one person that is just fascinated with red lights shooting after dark, and so they're always shooting under some red light somewhere, or another one that's always shooting reflections, or another one that's always, their thing is, as soon as that crossing walk sign turns and they get to cross the street, they're shooting people coming towards them. I mean, everybody falls into this kind of like, this is my idea of street photography, and this week I'm shooting people sitting in cafes outside or whatever. It's counterproductive, and it's against the whole kind of uh, the genre itself. I mean, Cartier-Bresson didn't go out looking for certain pictures, certain situations. He went out to see and to discover what he could find. And that's the real beauty of street photography, to not go out with any preconceived idea. You're freed up from the photojournalism having to follow a certain narrative that your assigning editor is interested in that day or that week. And now you can just whatever it could be, and often is a meaningless image in the big scheme of things, but you're just attracted to this element out of the blue, and you start working it. And then maybe after 10 days you realize, boy, these images are really pointing towards this, and these 20 images, they work well together. I've accomplished something here.
Totally. I love that. Yeah. Man, that's fantastic. Yeah. And so would you say that from the take that this take that we're looking at here, which is about 600 images, that you could pull out another magazine's worth of stuff about it on a different theme?
Well, so what I kind of made it really hard on myself, and because I have all these kind of guidelines that I follow that kind of help me to be successful consistently. And so, I do limit myself in that way, but then I take it a step further, like, shooting with one camera and one lens or something like that, not shooting with a zoom lens, not giving myself that flexibility. So I got to say, I do put limits on myself, but I don't limit to what I see and what I try to capture. That said,
you're not limiting the subject matter.
Well, I'm not. Anything that catches my eye is fair game, right? So,
exactly, yeah.
The thing is, one of the limitations I put on this issue of Curious, I started toning the selects, and this was a black and white image, this was a color image, and so I thought that was a little too easy. Okay, so so this is like the first issue I've ever done where everything's in color, and this is the first issue I've done where I've actually put my name on it, like this, this is my work, whatever. And so I wanted, some of these images are clearly black and white. Some of the images that aren't quite as good as they should be would look like fantastic in black and white. But I wanted to just, so one of the things I wanted to accomplish is just do a whole issue of color street photography, which, it's kind of another hurdle to get over, and it's kind of another limitation. Clearly, some of these images should be black and white, but to make them work and to have a successful image, when you're dealing with the element of color in street photography, because color is the wild card. You can't control the color of the jacket someone's wearing when they walk by you on the street when you're working a scene. To make a group of images in a magazine that all work together and that are all color, I think that was another, honestly, it could be, just a self-limitation thing, but I wanted to make that work as well, just to make it that much a little bit tougher on myself.
Yeah, you want to overcome that challenge,
right?
And I find, honestly, I've done shoots before that are very elaborate, and you have all these props, and it can make things very easy in a way. And sometimes I like to take a shoot and just strip it down, and makes it very difficult. Like, to pose a person on just a clean white background with nothing, and a normal person that doesn't know how to pose. I mean, it can be very hard, but sometimes in those limitations, it forces you to be more creative. And actually, by limiting your options, sometimes I think it's like someone who might have a little paralysis by analysis, overthinking, over analyzing, to just say, I'm going to do the whole magazine in color. Well, that helps you whittle down the pictures, eliminate all the ones that look best in black and white. So it kind of helps you have a basis to make decisions from, you know, as to how to limit the work. Because I mean, if I were to say pull the best 10 pictures from this tank, that could almost drive you a little bit crazy. Like, best 10 pictures for what? You know, the best 10 just overall, what I think are the best 10, or the best 10 that would make the best 10 prints, or best 10 double trucks, or, you know,
Well,
that would be very difficult. That's like making like a top 10 best albums of all time. Like,
right.
not limiting it by genre, you know, like best 10 jazz albums, a lot easier.
Well, the thing is, the images, they're it's almost like a performance. When you talk about a jazz album, okay, this is this album. It doesn't mean that one of these images
Totally.
in this album is going to um, appear in another form somewhere. So it could be black and white, it could be bigger, it could be smaller, it could be on a different type of, it could be anything. There's other lives for these images. Um,
Absolutely.
and so but on this performance, on this, when this all came together, this is how I saw this body of work made over 8 or 9 days, whatever it was.
That's awesome. Okay, I just have a couple of last little things and I'll let you go because
Okay.
I know we're going long. This was supposed to be like a 30-minute episode. But a couple of quick little things. One thing is I just wanted to note, like, I saw that you had some pictures there at the very beginning. Those are from the airport. Is that right?
Right.
So give me your take on that just concept of shooting right away. I mean, you're shooting before you even get to the place that you're going. You're gonna do a thing on Spain in Morocco, and you're shooting in the airport. And where was that? I don't know.
That was in Amsterdam.
Minneapolis.
So I had a couple hours in Amsterdam, and
Okay.
Nobody ever shoots pictures in airports. I mean, but it's a great place. I mean, everybody kind of shoots the picture of their airplane, oh, I'm going to get on the airplane, but nobody like
Yeah.
walks around and shoots pictures in an airport. So like that first shot of the rainy window, and then the like portal shot of the 747 with the bubble on top, those are images that will end up somewhere someday.
Totally. No, I love that. I love shooting in in airports. I mean, I do it all the time. I actually didn't. It was a surprise to me to hear you say that no one does that, because I feel like I see, maybe it's just on Instagram, like a lot of iPhone pictures, from airports, and it's always the silhouette of the guy pushing his roller bag or whatever.
Right.
And I've made a lot of those cliche. I shoot all the time when I'm traveling like that as well. So I think that's really cool. But I
Right.
mean, you actually, like, there's a difference between I have a camera on me and I'm going from one gate to the next gate and I'm going to click a few pictures along the way, versus, okay, I'm going to actually walk around and shoot in the airport.
Right.
Which I've only done that a couple of times. You have to have a layover or whatever, but yeah, it's awesome. It's like kind of like shooting fish in a barrel in a way. Like, the people can't leave.
Right.
So okay, and then talking about toning in particular, one thing really stuck out. I mean, we didn't talk about your toning process that much. It's just to give people a brief, summary of it. You don't do a lot. You do some sort of minor dodging and burning. You do some minor overall tone adjustments, like brighten up one side of the frame, darken one side of the frame, try to control highlights, things like that. And there's an exact quote from you, as you said, it's not rocket science. It shouldn't be perfect. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you can watch a video of someone toning an image, or they call it editing. I don't know why they call it editing. Editing to me is making your selects either for what you are going to tone, or what you're going to publish, or what you're going to submit, whatever. That's editing. Toning is when you set the color temperature of your file and you set the contrast. That's toning. So for me, if I'm looking on one computer screen, I've got ambient light in the room. It's going to look good here. It might not look good on somebody else's screen. Who knows how their screen is set up? But I know if I follow these numbers in roughly, it's going to look good on paper. Now, is it going to look like, you know, Steidl printed it on paper? No, it's coming out of blurb. It's going to, it's not a perfect product. You know, some of my favorite process is not a perfect process. It's a pretty good product, but some of my favorite images are, or posters or works of art, whatever you want to call them, are what bands used to do to advertise their concerts, you know, punk bands. And I collect, you know, these
Album covers.
well, album covers, but just the Xerox, you know, uh people used to punks used to spend all their time at, you know, Instaprint or Kinko's or whatever, and put together these you know, these gig posters, and some of them are amazing, and they're not high tech, and they're not beautiful, they're not perfect, but they're they're real pieces of art. And so I'm always a little leery, you know, if I'm printing something for somebody's wall and they paid me, you know, I'm gonna get the best print out of that file that I can. And I'm, you know, I have the skills to do that, and I'm happy to do it. But when I'm putting together a zine, you know, it's it lives in that moment, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's pretty close to perfect just the way I shoot it anyways, because I'm used to shooting on chrome, so you do a lot of that in camera, so it doesn't need a lot as far as toning is concerned. But I'm not going to worry about if this you know, oh, did I nail the contrast on that, or should that have been like uh two measures more magenta for that color balance or something like that. Even if you look at
Yeah.
you know, magazines used to be really serious about that. I mean, deadly serious. And they were serious about that because they had advertising next to the editorial pages. So if you got to get that, you know, that red from that Coca-Cola ad perfectly Coca-Cola red. And so if you're paying that much attention to the ad copy, you're going to pay that much attention to your editorial copy. Well, now we don't have those standards. You pick up a copy of Vanity Fair on the West Coast, it's going to be com- completely different tones than the copy you pick up on the East Coast. There isn't that quality control. They just can't do it anymore. They don't have the maybe it's a budget thing, maybe it's a skill thing, maybe it's just like something that had to be cut. I don't know, but so I'm okay with kind of, you know, you don't want to get in the way of people experiencing the image and having that experience of the image. You don't want something so toned so poorly that they can't, that it gets in the way of that experience. But you don't have to, like, you know, oh, is this the proper, is this like 18% gray? I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not rocket science in that regard.
Yeah, you don't want to overthink it. And I think also you were hinting at an idea there too when you said it shouldn't be perfect, you know. And I think you even said something like if it's too perfect, then you're gonna have a problem, you know. And I think that's that whole idea of trying to, you know, that there's something good about the imperfection, something more beautiful about the imperfections than what you think.
Yeah, the imperfections is where the true, like, you know, that's where like the heart of the image is, in the imperfections. The other, I mean, the problem is, you know, you try to make something perfect and it would never be perfect because you just couldn't do it in the film era. You know, something somewhere would not be perfect, and even if it was perfect, it wouldn't reproduce perfectly unless, you know, you matted the whole thing and had like a master print made or something like that. But today you can make it perfect, and people do make their images perfect for their website, for their Instagram feed or whatever, and it becomes boring. Every you know, there's not a pimple on a single face, there's not a crease in a person's slacks. And that, to me, it's just not, it that ruins the experience to me when I see something that's photoshopped to be perfect. That makes that
Totally.
that makes that not, it makes it unreal. And you're already dealing with a photograph that's just a visual representation of something that happened out in real life. To make that perfect where real life isn't perfect, it's just like it ruins the experience.
Yeah, it kind of disconnects the viewer.
Right.
So no, that's great. Okay, that's a great place to stop. You got a book on hand, or you want me to pull one out?
Let's link to, we'll link to the this Curious magazine number 5, and that is that's your reading assignment for this weekend. Now it'll take a week or so to get there from Blurb, but
yeah. And also tell people they need to follow at Kenneth Jarecke on Instagram. Look at your stories. You're sharing a lot of the same kind of information on your Instagram stories. You posted several of these pictures from Morocco and Spain on your Instagram as well. That's a great place for people if they have questions. Go over there and ask questions, comment on the pictures, ask questions over there. That's a great spot for it.
Okay, if you say so, Paul.
All right, so link it.
Okay.
And also be on the lookout in the coming days. We're going to be doing some cool stuff.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Paul.
So, all right, man. All right, see you.
Ciao.